I'm Mary Jane Newton. I work in EdTech. I've held lots of roles in product, in strategy, business development, and technology for publishers and education companies like the Oxford University Press, Macmillan Education, Imagine Learning, and a few others. And I'm delighted to be here this morning. I've been given a clipboard. I don't know why. I didn't know that they still did these, but I feel very important. No, I'm delighted. We're going to spend the next 45 minutes together, and the title of the title of the discussion is The Business Technology Coalition, moving from co-partnering to co-leading. And we are going to be discussing tips for aligning technology and business, how to best leverage emerging technologies, and how to drive innovation and agility. Now, we've all heard that phrase, every company is a technology company now. And I think this is why events like this are so brilliant, because once upon a time, I think people in technology were sort of, it was a slightly maverick, unconventional, geeky career. Look how far we've come. We're now in Subwell House. But regardless of a company's primary focus, technology is central to everything that we do, to operations, to innovation, and competitiveness. So it's not a nice to have, it's definitely a strategic driver. I did a little degree with the University of Oxford in organisational leadership, and I'm super interested in the field of study of leadership, and there's lots that's been written about leaders and their followers and the context, but there's very little, though increasingly more, research on co-leading. And I think it's a particular skill that's definitely going to be needed, because for technology and the business to really work together and to be aligned, there has to be a joint vision, there has to be collaborative execution and shared accountability, and I think, very importantly, crystal clear communication. And those are all skills that's not easy to pull off. But very fortunately for us, we have a very distinguished panel here who have experience in achieving just that very special alignment between business and technology. So we have Graham Rushton, CTO for Vodafone Partner Markets. We have the Director of Global Technology Operations for Save the Children International, Gerald Waterfield, and the CIO for NHS Resolution, Niamh McKenna. So can I just ask the panel very briefly to introduce yourselves?
Yes, I don't mind going first. Graham, I've met a few of you already. I work for Vodafone, but I don't work for the traditional part of Vodafone. So I look after all our partner relationships around the world, about 50 countries. So we have both cultural challenges and we have technology challenges, because we deal with very different starting points with a number of our partners. Is that enough?
Yes, that's very good. Thank you, Jerry.
Good morning, everyone. I know some of you out in the audience today. So Gerald Waterfield, I'm, as described, the Director of Global Operations for our Save the Children International. We have about 25,000 people working in about 100 countries. We're a $3 billion a year turnover organisation, and we work with about 55 million children. I've been doing this about 8 years, always worked in the private sector before, things like satellite, semiconductor manufacturing, robotics, BPO, and a long time in the media like the Daily Mail Group. And weirdly, all those experiences for me were for one reason, to work at Save the Children, because the challenges they face, you see the news, Gaza, Beirut, and all these things. You really need to put all that experience together, given that we don't get very little money for technology, and I'm sure we'll talk about that today. But thank you.
Great, and lovely to meet you all. So Niamh McKenna, I'm the CIO at NHS Resolution. We're an arm's length body of the NHS, which means we're effectively, we deal with claims, disputes, litigations on behalf of the NHS. So in fact, I feel like putting this in my LinkedIn profile, hashtag not a hospital, for all the LinkedIn requests from suppliers thinking that we are a hospital, we're not. Which means we're quite a small organisation, so much smaller than my colleagues here on the panel. We're only about 800 FTE, but we handle about £2 billion of clinical negligence claims every year. So quite a large amount of money passing through. Prior to that, I spent most of my life on the other side of this fence as a supplier. So I led Accenture's healthcare practice and worked for Accenture for about 20-something years.
Wow, super interesting. So very different backgrounds, very different organisations, and yet I suspect there's going to be quite a few similarities in how we approach technology and business alignment. So my first question to you is, what are the key challenges you faced aligning technology with the broader business objectives, and how have you worked to overcome them? And can I go to you, Jerry, first?
Thank you. As a charity, people don't give us money for tech, bottom line. $50,000, for example, that's 50,000 malaria treatments, that's 50,000 babies that don't die. So you have to, that's the context you daily work in. So to get any money for tech is hard. So the first thing you've got to do is start to build trust with the business leaders, because without them, we're still seen as a cost even today. And even today, we're probably running at a fraction of the industry kind of percentages. So you have to think really carefully. Critically, you've got to build those relationships, because you need to support the strategy of the business, how we're going to do these things, and that's clearly important. And we do large programs to make change. And certainly in recent times, we've standardized multiple systems into single systems to drive more efficiency and costs. But then sometimes you've got to do that low-level stuff that just makes things work. You know, how do I get a communication to Beirut at the moment? And that can be quite hard, because that's not necessarily at the top of the list. So you've got to build trust to get that investment. An example would be in 2015, when Windows 10 came out, for those who remember. Microsoft said it's the last version of Windows, your kids will grow up with it. Yeah, not really. Windows 11 appeared and TPM, and we were using the free licensing from Microsoft. They offered you could move to Windows 11 for free. Now, the previous time we'd done it, imagine we've got 15,000 people, 60 countries. Someone goes back to the office, gets their laptop rebuilt, all the days. It's a half a day at least. When you've got 15,000 employees, teachers, nurses, etc., that's a lot of man days lost to the business. So to make that happen, I had to work with the CEO to get him to get the regional leaders of the regions to make it happen. And we automated that process. And we reckon we saved about 2.5 million with licensing costs. And the fact that we probably saved 6,500 days of not people doing their work, because literally we automated it overnight. You know, they get the message, upgrade while they went to bed, wake up next morning, they're on Windows 11. When you start to do those things, you then start to get the ear of the business, because they suddenly realise that, you know, you're not a cost, we're avoiding costs. So you can start to build those trusts, and then you can start to say, security, oh no, but we don't need security, but we're in a war zone, it's really difficult. We need it even more in a war zone because of the people acting there and so forth. So you've got to start with those fundamentals of just building that trust. We know what the strategy is, but then the other things that you need to do to work around it. Mm.
Yeah, you see, I don't save babies, I'm afraid. We work for Vodafone. It's a comparable. So trust, we had this discussion last night in terms of building trust, but ours is purely P&L driven. So the way we approach anything in technology, we say if it's a technology-led project, you're in the wrong room. It's as simple as that. Unless I can attach any project we're driving to a goal of a business leader, it shouldn't be happening. And I genuinely mean that. If you look at all your projects, unless I can have full line of sight to where that's landing, understanding what benefits in, so the CFO can sit down and say, okay, what's the return on investment? Whose head is on the block for this? And I genuinely mean that. So I think it's probably easier for us because it's far less emotive. It's a very, so there is emotion in the business. Everyone's fighting for budget. But the reality is it shouldn't be our fight. But as you said, people seem to leave things out of the budget and then there is a fight. But honestly, the trust, it comes from the fact that it's a business-led project. Every transformation, all of this partnership has to be, you are the supporting partner. You cannot be the leading partner. You're there to help educate, you're there to help support, you're there to help bring all the skills that the business doesn't have. But unless the business is leading it, it's going to be a disaster. because they put you in the driving seat, and the second that happens, everything's the wrong way around. I mean, look, we all work in technology. Everyone understands that we've all been to this place, so I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But in a corporate where it is brutally just bottom line, then it's a lot easier, it's a lot cleaner. So we do have to have that business sponsorship. But I think now, rather than being a simple business sponsorship, as you say, there is now this co-leadership. They expect you to stand shoulder to shoulder with the CFO. When things go wrong, you're absolutely there. You take that joint ownership. And that's really the skills that you bring. You're able to help talk about why the DC went down or something, and therefore all the business stopped, and it was part of the transformation, therefore it's an IT problem. Well, actually, it probably isn't. But the important thing is that you both go to that board meeting together, you both sit there, and you both explain that this joint project has had a challenge. I think that, for me, I've seen a definite shift in the last few years because of the skills that are required, because most people in the business now, honestly, half the technology that exists, they just don't understand it. And I'm not being facetious there. I genuinely mean technology moves so quickly now that it's challenging for business, and it's not their job. It's not their job to know about technology, and that's where we, I think, play a far more important part.
Yeah, I mean, I think really good points made there by Graham and Gerald. So I suppose I'll just maybe nuance it a little bit. I think for me, the co-leading point is also about stepping in to take the leadership for each other when that's needed. And I saw that recently with one of our business areas. We were doing joint project, very much myself and the fellow directors, as you've said, they're at board talking together. But to get them over the line, to give that business organisation the final push, I needed to push it more than my fellow director. And the reason is because her directorate was kind of pushing back and saying, oh, well, we need to have these more features, we need to have this more thing, we need to be able to do this. And they were getting to the point where I think they were a highly analytical organisation, right? We're full of very clever solicitors, insurance people, and so on. And so, if there's an opportunity to overanalyze something, they will take it. And actually, someone needed to say, no, you're going live now. We're just going to go live, and you need to just take this system and see if it works for you. And if it doesn't, we'll change it. There's not a problem. We'll change it. But it's about also just someone taking that load, that emotional decision and load, and helping your fellow director get that through by being, in a sense, I was the bad guy. I said, look, if it doesn't work, that's on me. You can kind of blame me. And it was fine, of course. I knew it would be fine. I've been there, hundreds and hundreds of times, putting something live. And everyone moans for the first week, and then 3 weeks later, everyone's like, oh yeah, no, I've forgotten about our old system that we were using. So you do need to, I think it's just, that co-leading is also about having the right person just lead that bit. Overall, the objective, absolutely, I 100% agree with you. If it's not business-led, then we're just, there are technology-led projects, but they're the background ones that no one actually sees, right? So, if we need to rewire our data center or something, fine. But most of the business-facing stuff really, really needs to be business-led.
And well, thank you. Very, very, very interesting. And I'm hearing a lot of people. There's people skills that come through over and over again, isn't it? And waiting for the right moments in time. What role does data and analytics play in bridging that gap between business and technology?
So I think data is not a new concept. The use of data aggressively is, honestly. So we used to have, we still got spreadsheets. I mean, thank God someone invented Excel, because essentially that's how technology's run, just so you're aware. But honestly, the use of data has opened up, I think it's changed the business. We have enabled the business through the use of data and analytics, and the technology has made that far more appealing and easier to deal with. The problem we then generated is everyone wants all the data. And then we've created I think we went through about 5 years ago, and everyone will remember this, everyone built a data warehouse, data oceans, everybody got very excited, we put a ton of data into one big place, and it was utter crap. because there was so much in there. It wasn't really linked. No one really had an idea what we were going to do with it. And the business didn't understand why we were spending an absolute ton. And then we said, hey, let's just move it to the cloud. And everyone's like, well, it doesn't even work on-prem. Why are we going to stick it in the public cloud? There's the security issues. So I think I will keep hammering this point, because certainly in our business, this is an absolute key. If anyone asks for anything, the first thing we say is why, and I want to know what it's going to be used for and who is going to be using it, so that at the end, we have that benefits case, whether it's a complex one, whether it's a simple one. Bottom line is, you need to be able to go back to those business users and say, is this effective? Are you using this? And what difference is it making to the business? Do not start with, let's just put all the data in here, I'm sure it's going to be good. But that's where we did start, honestly, and I think the business has been educated now, and they're a bit more, they're a bit better at describing what they need, whereas previously they just said, yeah, just give me all the data. But cloud costs, when we talk about budgets, you have to be really, really careful. It's so easy to spin up 200 VMs and then wonder why we're absolutely blowing the budget on the cloud machine, and no one knows what these VMs are for. Someone had a great idea of running this proof of concept. They forget about it, no one shuts the VMs down, then we find out we've got all these orphaned accounts. Everyone knows exactly what I'm talking about, all that stuff, all that cost. But again, if it's the business who's leading it, it's their project, you have absolute line of sight of what should be there and what shouldn't be there. And in terms of innovation, I'm not stifling innovation. I want them to experiment, but I want them to control it. I want them to tell us why we're doing it. So I do believe in technology innovation, but again, it can only be in areas, realistically, these day and age, where you're doing it for a purpose. So if we're innovating in AI Gen at the moment, everyone's getting very excited about it. So what? Honestly, the idea of just providing Gen AI to it's the current strategy is, we'll open it up, we'll give everyone, I don't know, for example, ChatGPT, everyone can play with it, and I'm sure some good will come of it. I'm totally against that. I'll be honest, I'm totally against it. We educate some people, tell them what it can do, get them to come up with a few ideas, and then maybe create a sandpit as we've done and let them play with it a bit, but it has to start that way. So for me, I think data's great, I think analytics is great, but again, I still think it has to be driven from the top down and not from the bottom up. And the technologists, we're all as guilty of leveraging a bit of technology.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I think that relationship with the business, to really say, what are you using it for? What's the purpose of this data? In fact, one of my bigger teams is my business intelligence team, and we are investing a huge amount of effort in what I would call we call them the BI solutions team, which is, come to us, tell us what it is you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to get productivity improvements? Are you trying to, reduce this? Are you trying to track expenditure? What is it you're trying to do? And then we will help come up with a solution for you that involves, whatever the data can do. But I think there is a tendency, if we've got it, the business often think, well, we just need to measure all the things all the time. And that doesn't actually make a productive business. So I think that having that critical friend who can help you the business critically appraise what it is they're trying to achieve is really important. The other big thing for me around data is, I think, also a lot of transparency also around the technology side. So one of the things when I joined NHS Resolution, I discovered that, we had, I think, like 2 metrics that we were sort of reporting, I don't know, every quarter to the board, and that was pretty much it. And of course, that didn't reflect people's experiences on the ground in terms of service. It didn't reflect what they were feeling. And so, I was like, we have got to publish, all the things that we use to track ourselves. So don't be afraid to tell the business about how we're doing. And sometimes we don't do very well. Sometimes we mess up. We're not particularly good at responding to, new joiner requests or whatever. And so actually putting that out there helps people acknowledge their experiences, because they can see that we know that, we're not responding to those things well, and forces the business sometimes to engage, because they'll go, well, this isn't very good. And you're like, okay, great. Well, I could make this better, but it comes with a cost. and what is the amount of money, because we're not a charity, but we do have to look at the pennies very carefully. It's taxpayers' money ultimately. And so actually saying, well, is this, if we want to make this better, it's going to cost more. What's the business benefit you get out of us being able to process new joiners quicker? Is there a business benefit? And so it helps on that as well. So I think there's something, I think, is our responsibility to sort of help the business understand what we're doing as well with data, and helping them interpret how they can pull levers either to improve efficiency, costs, or the service that they get.
So we've actually made big strides over 5 years. We actually have a transformation delivery group, which I'm part of. And we have a transformation steering group, which is basically made up of SLT members. So we need a project. It could be, and one of them, for example, is data gathering. So in the industry, there's a fairly standard metric for capturing the performance of programs. Spend $1 million. How much impact did it have in Nicaragua on poor children, etc. And in the charity world, there are very few systems that solve those because there's no money for suppliers, frankly. And if it's off the shelf, like Microsoft, yeah, we can buy those things. But when it starts to get down to that kind of bespoke stuff for your industry, you kind of have to do your own thing. So we've started data gathering. And then to Graham's point, this massive thing of data now, how do we work with it? But then smartly, AI has been a big thing. Everyone wants AI. It's huge costs for us that we don't have. And so, and if you speak to Microsoft, they'll say, hey, give everyone AI, let them play, let them learn. Well, the challenge we get is, forget AI. If someone comes on and says, hey, I need a system. I need it to do this. Okay, how do you do it today? I don't know. We've always had a problem, never been able to make the process work. And you can't, well, if you can't make it work, how do you expect a computer to do it if you don't know how it works? And if you give them AI, it becomes even worse, because how do you know what to validate it against? So carefully, we've actually done, got use cases from the leadership. What do you want? And so one of the ones, for example, they were a charity. We actually bid for awards effectively. So most of our money comes from governments, UN, all those sort of things. And so there are programs of work, multiple charities. Like any other RFP, you make a business case for it. But it's actually quite time consuming. You go, well, we did a similar thing 5 years ago, let me get the paperwork. So we're actually using things like AI now as a pilot to say, gather all the data and start to create that draft of what that proposal looks like. And then it's the human eyes just going over it quickly. Now, typically the team is spending 8 hours each creating these things. So either we double the amount of RFPs we go in for, or we can half the time they work. And so we're trying to be quite focused and leading the business, like, just don't go free for all. I know all the tech companies say that's the thing to do. And actually it's working, because we're already starting to see some fruits just by picking 1 or 2 bite-sized chunks, keeping it simple. And the simpler it is, the more likely it's going to be, particularly in our context of the places we work where you might not have energy or connectivity. So keeping those things simple. So it's kind of, again, guiding the business to, like, I know you see the ads on TV and the radio, but keep it focused. What's the problem you're trying to solve? We can help you pick on that problem. And you've got to guide them in that way. So you're not necessarily telling them, here's the tech, here's the thing to go and fix, but you're guiding them to think on what do they want to solve and how they might solve it.
So just to pick up on Gerald's point, I know I sound like the bad guy. I'm not trying to be the bad guy. Just, again, so AI at the moment is fantastic. I'm part of the panel for Vodafone that's leading our AI strategy, so we work with this stuff every day. And I think that's great. So I love the idea that the business want to use AI, but AI is not, I'm going to be rude here, AI is not intelligent. It's a way of deriving intelligence from your data. Your data's crap. The response your AI gives you is going to be crap. And therefore, this idea of people say, oh, it's going to be fantastic, they're starting at top down, we should all have AI, we should all have Gen AI, we should all be able to point it at this data domain, we should all do this. Well, that's great, but if the data in that data domain is crap, it's going to give you bad, and once you start to get into the data poisoning aspect, so essentially if you've got a public-facing AI, people can start to influence the answers as they tune your engine and they can get it to give you the wrong answers. But as a simple statement, going back to the use of data, AI is a tool that will sit on top of your data And the business don't seem to understand, they seem to think it's intelligent and it will interpret the data and provide them with the right answers. And I think one of our jobs, certainly for the next year or so, as AI starts to really boom into the business, it can be incredibly effective. It can save time. It can also give you a complete pile of crap if your data's bad. And I think that is ownership of the business, because as you were saying about those processes, if their basic processes are wrong and that the information or the way they maintain the data isn't going to be right, sticking AI on top of it's not going to help. Or in fact it will. It'll just give them bad data faster.
Yeah.
I know, Niamh, you're very passionate about this.
AI yeah, I mean, it's a real challenge, actually, particularly in public sector, because so many of these models are trained and solutions are trained to do things that we don't do. So, AI has been used in insurance, right, for quite some years now. So, yes, it will make smart decisions about settling a case or recommending a settlement or whatever. Our role in the public sector at Resolution is to resolve claims fairly. So quite often we will make a decision to take a case to court because we think it is in the interest of the taxpayer and the public to have a decision on that. That may not be the most cost-effective decision for that case. And an AI can't make those kind of value judgments. Maybe in one day, we might get there, but right now, those AIs are optimized to, you can optimize them for cost, you can optimize them for whatever. So that's a real challenge for us, to be totally honest, because I have, all sorts of lovely people running to my director of claims going, we've got an AI that will do this, that, and the other. And I'm like, whoa. We are not the same as a law firm. We are not the same as an insurance claim. We are motivated by different things, and we are held to account by a different set of rules. And of course, as you say, I have terabytes of data, terabytes of it. Great, but is it usable? I mean, we've spent 8-9 months now with my data science team trying to extract birth mode from our documents. You'd think it's pretty simple, but it's not, because what of course happens is we get an expert witness report. It talks about, forceps and ventouse and and finally C-section. Well, the key part was the C-section, and an AI actually at this point is not, they are not as advanced as people think they are. And so it pulls out all of the stuff that's mentioned. Yes, it can spot the words, great. I don't need to know all the words that didn't apply, I need to know the one that did. And so, will it get there? I think it will, but is it there yet? Is it there today? No, it really isn't. And I'm sure you get as well frustrated with the suppliers who keep running in and going, we can find out this for you. And you're like, you really can't actually. I've had a pretty good team looking at this, and we are 70% accurate on it. 70% is nowhere near good enough. Nowhere near good enough.
So I think there's a phrase we've started to coin, which is quite interesting. When we're talking to business people, we tell them it's co-pilot, not autopilot.
Yeah, okay? I like that. I might nick that.
We do, because people seem to think they're just going to go to a driverless system. They're going to sit back, have the dinner while it all gets done for them. And we're trying to remind it's here to help you. It's not here to do the job for you. And I think it's interesting.
I'm going to steal that one, definitely.
Yeah, I think we all will.
But so speaking about AI, how are you using innovation to drive that coalition between business and technology? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So in a weird way, not speaking of AI. So again, I think it's back to that thing about, are there opportunities to innovate? Yes. And AI is one of the tools in my kit bag that may or may not be used to help with that innovation. So, again, I think the innovation needs to come from solving a business problem, 100%. What I have found works quite well now is having people, particularly business analysts in my team, who understand the business really, really well. So they're able to kind of help the business think through the business problem, understanding a bit of that tech side as well as the business side, and then coming back to we've got we call it a solution architecture forum, but we've basically got a forum whose job it is to try and help then solve that business problem, as articulated. And it's one of the tools, but it's not the only tool. And there's lots of innovation that can happen. I mean, particularly in our sector, there are things you can do that don't involve particularly AI. And again, people forget there's a hierarchy here. And there's machine learning, and there's just extracting certain data points, and there's information. Some of it then at the end is AI. But when we say AI, a lot of times people just mean machine learning, or they mean just a really good analysis of data. And it doesn't need to necessarily be AI. So again, keep everyone focused on the prize. What are you trying to solve? And then let's look at the various things we've got at our disposal to solve it. And I think try and move quickly. Because the sooner they see a thing, then they start going, right, okay, if I have that, then I could do this. And I think if we spend too long as technologists coming up with a beautiful solution, then they kind of lose momentum. So I think move really quickly into giving them something that's even half right and say, is this kind of what you meant? And then go from there.
I think we've done a really useful thing. So in technology, and this is what we talk about, taking our skills and helping the business. What we've done is we've mapped our business in terms of the general areas of the business. And I think you can all do this. I don't know whether you've done it or not yet. And we've broken down using information from Gartner, using information from the business, and we've created a heat map for general areas of the business. And it says, which is most applicable, that's going to deliver the most value? Is it AI? Is it Gen AI? Or is it machine learning? So if you're going to apply those technologies, and we've created a heat map, and it's very easy to do because you can look at the types of processes at the moment that they're very good at and the types of processes they're not good at. So for us with networks, for example, Gen AI is only useful as an interpretation of what people are asking. It's not good. We need ML and AI. Why? Because it's linear data, it's well connected, it's well referenced. You don't need Gen AI for that. What you actually need is AI and ML, right? So with maps, we have a heat map, and the reason I say this is it makes it easier to support the business. When they start coming up with ideas from that area of the business, you can help coach them. You can help talk to them about saying they've got these buzzwords and everything else, and that's fine if you want to help interpret them. But honestly, and I can't take credit for this, it was one of the Gartner partners who showed us what had been done in the sector as they were driving forward, and I've simply stolen the idea and done it. But it was really useful because it makes you sit down, look at the types of processes and the types of area of the business you've got, and when you're formulating this strategy of where you want to work with people, where you want to deliver Gen AI, and it's probably more important in your area because cost is so tight. It allows you to speak to those people and realistically understand it's not for you, or this is the area that will be for you. And it was really quick to do, but like I say, I stole it from Gartner.
Very good.
But if you need to also go back to base, even back a layer. So in our business, IT, how are you going to innovate? It's the thing we get all the time. It's like, IT aren't the innovators. There might be. Innovation comes from the person with the problem in the field trying to solve a problem. That's where your use case comes from. Give us that use case and then we can turn that into something meaningful. But there was an expectation that IT will come up with all the solutions, and of course we can't. We only know the problems when you tell us. There may be the odd person comes up with an idea, but typically even that's probably around back-end IT stuff. But if we do this and automate that. So one of the changes we had to do was to encourage people. They've created community of practices where people put ideas in. We've now got a form people can fill in, and then it goes into a triage and say, hey, could we do this? And we see if we can. We can give a statement of work and a cost and effort when we might be able to do it. And and now we've got hundreds of these, and the real things that people want to do. We're overwhelmed because we don't have a big team. But the brilliant thing is when you now say, look, here's all the demand for all these real things that you want to do as a business. We've catalogued it. This is how much potentially it can cost. You can either do it slowly over the next couple of years and you have to wait, or give us some more investment and we can start to deliver these things. And since we've done that, the volumes have come through the roof. We're still not delivering yet, but at least we've got the people thinking about what is it I need. And when they fill the forms in, if they're not good enough and don't give us, we reject it. No, we need more detail. I need something that pays all the people in the country isn't a request. Yeah, but it's made such a difference. But you've got to go back to those really low level and stop expecting the technology. We're here to support. We're an enabler of the company. We're not here for tech. And I keep telling my team, we're here for children, we're not here to write great code, we're here to support the needs of the children that we help. And getting that into the business makes such a difference. So it comes back to that very first point about collaborating, building that trust, getting them to think about the problem.
Yeah. And that's been my experience as well, is that sort of not invented here syndrome. You know, you need the business to take ownership of the issues and innovations. How do you, Jerry, how do you prioritize through your list of suggested innovations?
It's a tricky one. I mean, it's resource, cost, need, and so we get the right people in the room. So we have a weekly calls to kind of, that one looks like a good one, looks like it's urgent and important. Sometimes it might be legislation might change, something quickly you have to deal with, and you have to put something in place in a hurry. The US regularly change regulations. In our world, banned equipment like Chinese equipment's becoming a headache because you've got USG 889 regulations, you mustn't use certain equipment. Suddenly you might be using it, because a week ago that was perfectly fine. Suddenly now it's a problem. So you have to suddenly think about how you react to things. So we just have to prioritise them case by case. It will go to the steering group that we've talked about, and then that's made of different business leaders, and then between them they can choose, we'll do that, that can wait, maybe we won't do it at all.
So I'm being given a time warning. We've got 5 minutes left, so in those 5 minutes, tell us about an initiative that you've led that went particularly well, and tell us what went well about it so that we can all learn from it.
Well, I'll kick off. So when I joined Resolution, I did that thing that everyone does where you sit and you go and talk to different parts of the business. And I sat down and talked to this lady, and she said, I said, well, what do you do? And she said, I'm a researcher. And I said, talk me through your job. And she said, well, what I do is I think we have a research idea, so I'm looking at diabetes and lower leg complications, and I have to go and ask this team over here to give me a list of cases, and then I have to go and look over there, and then I've got to see if they're right, and then I've got to look at all the documents, and then 3 months later I've got a document set that I can go and I was like, that's 3 months to find some documents? I think we can do something about that. And so then I kind of said, okay, fine, I think we can help here and cut down this research time. And so effectively just got it's called AI Doc Search. It's not particularly AI fancy. It's effectively a document search tool where they can search all the documents and quickly get to the document set that they want. But it was one of those things where I don't think the business knew how much pain it was causing them in a way. In a weird way, it wasn't until they articulated to me, and I was like, this should take minutes, not months, to find the documents that you need in order to do your research. Yeah. So that's probably the one I'm most pleased with, because we have cut down, and back to your point, which is now then they've got 3 months to do, they've got more time, which means they can churn out more research, and ultimately we're here to prevent patient harm. That's really our mission, which is stop what happened from happening again, because it shouldn't have happened. So actually, if we can get that research out quicker, we can kind of effectively do better good.
A very low level one for us is we've got 15, 18,000 laptops in circulation on a 3-year life cycle. So you imagine every year across the globe there's 5,000 laptops being changed, data transferred, all those kind of things, which is always done manually because of very small teams. So this year we introduced Autopilot, and thank you for reminding me of the co-pilot. And the business had gone mad. They said, this is brilliant. I just type in my email and suddenly all my data. So it took us a bit of effort. But that saved 2,500 probably man days of people, wherever they are, getting half a day back, not having to go to the office, not be able to do anything, maybe go to a meeting while they're waiting for it to be built, which is how we used to do it. So it's a very low level thing, but the benefit's actually for the business, not for us. But also it's freed my team up, because they're a small team, we probably don't have enough people to support the number of people we have. It's the nature of an NGO. They've now got more time to do the more important things, which could be added value stuff. So these little changes sometimes have a really big impact. So that's one of the big things we've done.
I'll keep it short. Vodafone sometimes sells its entities, like we sold Vodafone Spain, you'll see in the press, and we sell it to another people. One of my jobs is to look after this separation of divestments. You have 2 years to completely separate the entire company. Networks, everything. Every system, everything that's done in the group system has to be then done locally, and you have 2 years. And we've done 5 of them, and they've all gone well. And there's one mantra we have for ensuring the project goes well. We do not focus on go-live dates, ever. All we focus on is termination dates. You have 2 years, and then I'm turning this off. I don't care what you do between now and then, but I'm turning it off in 2 years. And I tell you, if you want to focus people, focus them on the day that doesn't exist. Because, okay, obviously you extend, but what we've learned in change programs is this idea of go live and comms, and everyone gets excited and the business just doesn't care. You tell the business that's turning off, and then as you get closer and closer, all the comms isn't about how well we went live. It's, you've got 2 weeks, you've got 1 week, you've got 2 days. And it drives an incredible amount. So we've separated 5 companies in the last 4 years, and all of them have run pretty much on time. And I would say the reason it's successful is because we focus, I sound terrible, don't I? I sound like I focus on the negatives, but it's a good trick.
I actually had a fantastic prof who used to call this the creation of inertia, as in the opposite of inertia. You know, that sort of agility, how do you jolt people into action? Very nice indeed. Now, I think we have time for some questions. Who would like to go?
Well, it's more a comment really about bad data and AI. I think the approach potentially that can help is that you can put AI on top of bad data, but then you use the answer that AI gives you to say, that's nonsense. Where in the data, what in the data has generated that ridiculous answer? So I think the case that everybody knows about probably is the sentencing AI in America that was trials, where they wanted to have an independent, impartial idea of what a sentence should be for a crime, and they put in all the data, and of course, being black came out as you need an extra 6 months in your sentence, which clearly you then have to say, Jesus Christ, you know, we are a racist country, essentially. And so I think bad data can be exposed by AI producing strange answers.
Yeah, I think you're right, it can be, but I think so the takeaway from that is we shouldn't get to that stage, should we? If it has to be that we use AI to explain that, the business needs to take ownership of their processes. So I would agree with you, it's a great way to reflect back to the business how bad their processes are, but for me then I would turn AI off for them in that area because it's a no use. So I think it would be a great tool, but I think the bottom line is when we're explaining the deployment of AI, when you look at the use cases, and we have a governance board that assesses use cases, and to be clear, even when your data's good, a lot of the use cases aren't, and I'll be hard about that because people will come up with areas of the business. You need to understand how much it costs to run. Well, you will obviously understand how much it costs to run AI, and so there is
trade-off.
There is definitely a trade-off. You're right, and some of those priority decisions are just not worth it. And I'm really sorry.
No, it's true. And the other problem is, if you take that one, that's really obvious. But imagine there's some less subtle or more subtle answers that may not be obviously wrong, but you start believing it. So you're not going to see it. That's a really obvious one, you're going to spot it. But some of them might be subtle, so you don't spot it, and then a year later you've got a huge problem. You might have a lawsuit because no one spotted the thing. So it is coming back to the data's got to be good. And then know what it is you're trying to get. You know, the thing about AI is you need to be able to validate the results sufficiently to a point where you can then back to trust. You trust the data. So you run it against known scenarios, known things, until you get that 99.999%. Then maybe you can start to trust the things you don't know. But you've got to get that bit going first before you can really trust them.
Do we have time for one more?
Yeah, so part of the discussion earlier focused on not wanting to put innovation in years of AI just for the sake of it, which I can't go, you don't want to give people AI because it's a fad. So you said it had to be driven from the top, which is fine. But there's also part of the discussion that said that people at the top, they don't get this new technology because it's kind of, especially in business, because it's totally new, there's new paradigms, new ideas. So how do you bridge the gap between having kind of top-down decision making in terms of understanding how AI technology should be used, and with the lack of knowledge of what it can actually do, what the capability of it actually is?
So we spent a year before we launched it putting the guardrails in place, and by that I meant the governance, the understanding, teaching people. So it's not we don't give it to them, we created a sandpit. We did videos, well we didn't, but as a business we created a whole load of education about this is what we can do, and we created a controllable sandpit with guardrails so we knew what it was going to cost us. And people can go in there and they can play and create small POCs. So I'm not saying don't do it, but there's no point in doing that unless you have the process and the governance to understand how you're going to validate all of those ideas, as you're saying with, you know, you have to have a really clear picture of how you're going to govern that, you know, so creating innovation is fantastic, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to prioritize. So if you start with that part, that's the hard part, and then the idea of creating a sandpit and exposing it to people, going back to that heat map, you'll understand where it's probably better to expose it to parts of the business. Again, you have to make those kind of decisions. I would definitely say the governance that we did has really stood us in good stead, because we currently have about 50 or 60 POCs running on a slightly larger scale. And I would say from the governance, the way it's weighted, there's probably 3 or 4 of those that will, at the moment, that will probably really see the light of day.
But also it's in context to your organisation. We're a charity, so just don't have that money sloshing around to give everyone access. But, you know, another org might. Yeah, and if it puts the guardrails in, you know, and if you speak to all the AI companies, give all your employees opportunity, they'll innovate, and I'm sure they will. So you've got to take the context of your own organisation, budgets, needs, and all those things are also a factor when it comes to this. So our budgets are tight. We're a charity. No one gives us money for tech. They give us money for malaria treatment, teachers, medicine, food. Yeah. So we have to do these small use cases, try, experiment. We can't just give it to everybody. There may be a time in the future, who knows. But another company, that could be quite different. Or, you know, like Vodafone clearly are doing it, but they've put some guardrails in first. So it's not even a one-size-fits-all answer to this one, because it depends on your own context.
Yeah, I mean, what I'd say is, my view is innovation is most successful when it is driven kind of closest to the point which is going to be deployed. So that top-down leadership, yes, that's about creating the guardrails, the governance, the budgets and constraints and whatever, and that's all great. But ultimately, the innovation for me is always driven at the coalface, and I've seen some amazing examples. I've been to see a hospital in Copenhagen where they literally created a mock ward right next to the ICU and did innovation literally. So if you finished your shift, you could go and spend 20 minutes in their innovation lab, which was a mocked up ward, and design stuff with the innovators there. And why that worked so well is, A, it was right there. People could go out of a tough shift or whatever, having experienced some things, and then go and say, hey, look, you know, these are problems we're having. I just had this today, this happened. Is there something you can do to help? So I think it's about getting that innovation right at the coalface and then having people solve those business problems together. I keep coming back, AI is just a tool. AI is just one of the things in the kit bag that will solve. And it's a great one, don't get me wrong. I think it has great potential, but we need to stop people coming, and I do think it happens a lot top down, if I'm honest. You know, you get sort of senior people, they go, oh, we need to do AI. No, no. What's the thing you're trying to solve? And on the ground, what do people think is the real problem? Because you often get a disconnect between what a senior leader will think is the problem in their team and what the team think is the problem in their team. And so, you know, that's why I think just getting that coalface is where you really need to solve it.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. I think we're at the end of the panel. Please, could you put your hands together for the panelists?